It's a race to save a man whose lungs are on the verge of collapse. In a city that has already lost thousands to coronavirus and where medical services are at a breaking point. Ciudad Juárez in Mexico is a city well acquainted with death. Cartel violence sometimes kills dozens in a single weekend. But now, the city is struggling with something even more lethal.
Because of the collapse of the hospitals. Could be half an hour or could be an hour.
Hospitals filled to capacity in October, around the same time that El Paso, Texas, just over the border, became a hotspot. By November, El Paso was the epicenter of the outbreak in the United States. Still, the Twin Cities are fighting the pandemic with almost no coordination between them. Meanwhile, an invisible killer has shown that now more than ever, regardless of politics or geography, Mexico and the United States live and die together in the borderlands. Paramedics here in Juárez, Mexico, describe a deadly scene that plays out over and over. People refusing to go to the emergency room, sometimes until it's too late.
Es mucha gente la que se va quedando en el camino y hemos visto cientos de personas que se han muerto por COVID.
A few weeks before Christmas, they respond to Alejandro, a 43-year-old man who'd resisted going to the hospital until he could barely move. He lives in Juárez and works in El Paso, and had been crossing every day until he got sick. He died 3 days after the ambulance picked him up. Alejandro was one of the many people who have continued going back and forth legally, even after COVID restrictions were put in place in March. Border Patrol has logged over 700,000 crossings monthly.
Juárez and us, we have these beautiful relationships. We go back and forth. This is the downside of a great relationship.
Juan Pablo Arras drives an ambulance in Juárez, where he lives. He has family in El Paso and has watched in fear as the virus spreads on both sides. He lost his aunt to COVID-19 in October. 2 of his cousins in Juárez got sick, and 3 of his uncles in Texas were sick over the summer.
Ver que mi misma familia no hace caso de los protocolos, no trajeron cubrebocas cuando sabían que tenían contacto con mi tía.
Juárez mandated masks and has coordinated with the Mexican federal government on other COVID safety restrictions, like limits on how many adults can be in one vehicle. On the Texas side, mask wearing was ordered by the governor but not enforced. Social distancing was suggested but not required.
I mean, you still see people gathering, you still see people going out. It's a slap in the face, for a lot of us.
For 2 cities that, in many ways, function as one tightly knit metropolitan area of 3 million people, a border wall was no match for COVID-19.
The virus does not respect any border. There's no barriers. It's relentless.
When cases began to spike in November, paramedics on the U.S. side were also overwhelmed.
Almost 9 out of 10 calls were COVID-related. Body aches, fever, shortness of breath. When the spike hit us, it hit us hard.
It meant that medical workers struggled to care for non-COVID patients as well. Hospitals here felt like a war zone.
You kind of lose faith in humanity a little bit. It feels like you're only fighting by yourself, like the fight is only being fought inside a hospital.
But the streets of El Paso showed a very different story.
It looks so calm from the outside, so calm. Nobody knows, except the people that work here, what's going on inside.
Local officials in El Paso County tried to implement a 14-day shutdown in late October, but Texas's Attorney General blocked it.
I'm pretty much having to depend on what the governor wants us to do. And he said that if we ever got to 15% capacity in our hospitals, that would be alarming. We've got to 53%.
In El Paso, the sheriff's department looked to prisons for extra hands when the bodies piled up, and the city more than doubled its supply of mobile morgues. As deaths mounted on both sides, funeral homes struggled to keep up and keep workers safe. Funeraria Luz Divina is a 20-minute drive from the border. They had to warn clients that COVID-19 victims must be cremated, not embalmed. Purchase Funeral Home works on both sides of the border. They've been through wars, cartel violence, and mass shootings. But they say nothing has filled their crematoriums, chapels, and cemeteries like the coronavirus.
Estamos trabajando 12 horas, 18 horas. No nomás es un cuerpo, dos cuerpos, tres cuerpos. Son bastantes cuerpos.
Even mourning loved ones has become risky. And yet, people still come to grieve. One of the most devastating impacts has been on families. Bani Soria Najera lost 6 family members to COVID. She spoke to Insider during a blanket drive on the east side of El Paso.
It's my mom, my dad's sister, and my cousin. Fast forward a little bit longer, another one of my aunts passes away. And then right before Thanksgiving, another one of my uncles passed away. So it's just been like hit after hit after hit.
Our community has a lot of homes that are multi-generational. We have a high percentage of people living with diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, which makes us also more vulnerable to complications on the COVID-19.
The number of new cases started going down in December. Juarez still had no vaccine shipments in sight. But the first Pfizer vaccines arrived in El Paso on December 15th.
And this is the very first person in the city of El Paso to receive the COVID-19 vaccine.
Ready? Don't cry.
Healthcare workers were the first in line.
It's done.
Fingers crossed. Hopefully it works. I always said at the beginning that I wasn't going to get it. I wanted to see what it was going to do first. And it's scary.
Juarez finally began receiving vaccine doses in the middle of January. Officials worry that this is just one example of an uneven response in an interdependent region, and it could very well slow recovery on both sides.
If we don't get better, Juarez will not get better. If Juarez does not get better, we don't get better.